record and share. Oops, work. Yeah. When I maximize my browser screen, it goes to my main monitor instead of my laptop monitor, which I'm sharing. Let's see, let me try it again. There we go. Okay, so first on the agenda, wanted to pass it over to Scott Stock um, to mention what he's doing. He's been scanning the Ant build scripts to get a better sense for what's going on there. But Scott, was there anything you wanted to talk about with that?
Yeah, pull up that wiki page, the
Okay.
CTF tracking notes. That's capturing. It's both how the build the XML works and also how the vehicle runners and the CTS runners are working. So for any test package, there's going to be a build.xml file that has a package target, and that's invoking the TS vehicles task def, or it's invoking other artifact related tasks like ts.egb, ts.war, etc. So that's the equivalent of the Archelian at deployment method, where it's creating the test artifact. And so I have the builds parsing in a given for a given EE10 TCK dist, where it looks at the tree, which includes the source of the tests and the classes and the Ant scripts. And that code is in the repository that's in the agenda, the Jakarta Red Hat, Jakarta EE TCK tools fork, and it's under the tools, TCK rewrite, blah, 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 platform Ant code base, our package. TCK rewrite.
I'll rewrite.
TCK rewrite. Well, we have the other open rewrite stuff.
Okay.
And then go down to the AMP package. That's okay. So these in the code base are just the starting of kind of equivalent of the task defs and related classes to capture information from the build.xml. But actually, all the real work is still just being done in tests. So if you go look at the test package, and then there's an app package, or under the test, and then
yep.
an app package.
Let's see. So
Oh, no, I'm sorry. It's test in the TCK rewrite module, not the actual platform TCK.
oh, 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 okay.
Yes, you just go up to the tests.
Oh, under yeah, okay, yeah, sorry, the test.
Yeah. So,
Let's see. So
source of the test.
source test. And build XML would be under here, probably. Nope.
No, I can't.
And
Can you make your screen a little bigger? I can't.
oh, yep.
I'm in trouble reading the font. Yeah, okay, so yeah, all right, there you go, and. So these are actual tests of actually running the build, running, pulling in a build.xml from a package and parsing it, and then looking at the task. So if you look, for example, look at the vehicles artifacts test. That's the one I've been working on most recently. The other's just kind of precursing to figure out how stuff works. So this first test is basically just validating that this test only runs if you have a ts.home system property set to an EE10 distribution, and then this is just validating that it's a valid EE10 distribution, expected contents. So the next test is the one that's actually running a build for one of the TCK distribution tests, this EGB32. Oh, damn it, sorry, someone's doing some construction here. This is actually running the build for this EGB32 timer service stateless test. So and then it pulls out the package target, because that's basically the main entry point for building a test vehicle in any of the CTS tests. And then for this one, it's looking at the TS vehicle and parsing that, and then pulling out some information like what are the classes going into it, what's the vehicle name, and then, but unfortunately, and this is described in the CTS notes page. So the way that the EGB Lite, servlet, and similar vehicles behave is they actually have a dynamically created, when the artifact is created, servlet. And the reason is the client that's run, it's a how's it go? The actual test client, so the client.java file that you find in these type of tests, it subclasses or is it vice versa? I know that, yeah, the servlet, the EGB Lite servlet vehicle class it's created is a subclass of the client.java file or class in these test packages. So it's basically, that's how it's encoding the kind of the protocol, the protocol endpoint into the test artifact. So ultimately that's the server that gets invoked, which in turn just calls the client. So that's how it's running the test inside of the application server under test. So basically the build.xml package is creating the test artifact and incorporating the equivalent of the Archelian protocol classes, as well as the test class, into the deployment. So I'm going to be building this out or expanding this until I actually have, complete test artifacts being generated from Java code, which will then go into an app deployment method, an Archelian app deployment method, and validate that works. If you go back to the CTS page, or I'm sorry, the wiki, that CTS notes page. So this first part on the notes on the vehicle runners is talking about how the tests are run under the CTS. So basically every test is a subclass of this lib harness EE test. And for tests that are going to have a candidate need for a protocol, a custom protocol, they're going to be a subclass of this service EE test. And so there's like about 880 of those. I assume, you know, there's only going to be a few different handfuls, at most a handful of protocols that are required. I mean, to me, it looks like it's going to be servlet, EJB, you know, maybe another one. We've already, that client doesn't fall under that. It's actually a direct subclass of EE test, and we've already looked at how to do that protocol, another prototype. But for example, another direct subclass of EE test, which means it wouldn't, it probably doesn't need a custom protocol. In fact, it doesn't. It's just invoking a servlet, is this web client, base URL client. So those are tests that we will be able to, once we have the deployment method, simply use the existing servlet or the Archelian servlet protocol to invoke. So I'm going to focus on the service EE test to figure out how many potential custom protocols to look at. And one thing I was going to initially just try to look at is, could I do a custom protocol that is simply effectively utilizing the existing vehicle runners, and just try and encapsulate how the CTS is working into an Archelian protocol? I'm not sure that exactly maps, but that's one thing I want to try, because that's the way to minimize the actual changes we have to do, because then it would basically come down to generating the at deployment based on the build.xmls, and then effectively you're going to have an Archelian.xml that's setting something like some of the key properties. I think we're going to have, if we want to minimize the impact, I think we're going to have to keep like the ts.jte file that has a lot of properties. Because if you look at, I mean, basically the invocation point into all the tests is a simple run with a string arguments and a properties file.
Mhm.
You know, and those are getting parsed by the EE test based subclass to actually, you know, figure out what test is being asked to run. And the runner, which is somewhat equivalent to a protocol, but the details there still need to figure out. I mean, so I've documented the EGB Lite servlet vehicle behavior a little bit more on the bottom here. You know, and that's just showing when the framework gets down to trying to invoke the class, it's ultimately invoking this EGB Lite runner thing, which is just invoking a servlet on that's been, you know, bundled into the test artifact and run on the server. So this, you know, is equivalent to the Archelian servlet thing, but again, the difference being that it's invoking effectively the EE test, or actually the service EE test on the server side. So that, you know, why the actual protocol is servlet, you know, the protocol also includes the execution of the test. So this is where we would have to have basically, you know, the custom CTS protocol endpoint just to deal with how the tests are invoked, which effectively would be another implementation of, I guess, the service EE test, or at least calling out to a service EE test on the server side, and then, you know, encapsulating the output or checks that it does into a test result. I mean, basically, the CTS is doing something similar. They return a status, and they have a remote status for when it's invoked remotely. I mean, the bottom line of all this is it seems like we can certainly parse the build.xmls in the test packages programmatically using the Ant APIs. I was a little worried that it wasn't going to properly navigate the hierarchy and pull in all the properties, but it definitely seems to do, because in fact, for this EGB Lite servlet vehicles, to build the artifact, at least in a unit test, we'll probably just get around this when we get to doing it for real, but you actually have to invoke Java-C, the ts.java-c and task to build the vehicle runner endpoint that's included in the test artifact. And one of those tests is actually doing that. But the problem is, in terms of actually being able to manually create the artifact and compare it to what exists in the bundle, is that A, that overwrites the bundle artifact, and B, they delete the EGB Lite servlet code for the TS vehicle deletes the class that it compiles for some reason. I'm not sure why that wasn't just left in as part of the TC bundle disk, but that's unfortunately what happened. So it's going to complicate testing this. I mean, it may just be irrelevant. But the point is that it's definitely running, because I'm to the point where I'm actually running the task and generating the artifact as you would have done when you built a TCK disk.
Is the custom class, I mean, the generated class that gets compiled specific to embeddable, EJB Lite,
Yeah,
EJB, which, because we don't
it's
need that, because we don't need that for 11. I mean, that's gone, I think.
well, it's specific to the EGB Lite. Well, it's not specific to, well, I don't know, are these, so for example, this test package, or where did I show that test? Go back to the code, the test class.
Oh, let's see this. Yep.
Where I show, so is this class, is this test package, this ComSun EGB3 2 timer servlet stateless, is that a valid test still?
Let me go to command line.
It's simply using the EGB Lite vehicle. I don't know that this is actually has anything to do with EGB Lite.
Let's see.
Or that's the name of the vehicle, which really is just a servlet.
I think that should still be valid. I think Scott Marlowe is bringing up that the embeddable container, which is a whole separate vehicle,
Okay.
is not an E11. I could be wrong as to what Scott M is trying to point out.
Yeah, there's another, I think there's another runner for embeddable. Because if you look at, so the other thing that I pointed out in the notes is that there's basically one factory method that maps from that vehicle name, like an EGB Lite servlet vehicle name, to the actual runner, which is going to effectively encode the protocol information or the protocol requirements. And in the embedded EGB type of vehicle is a separate runner. So I think there's not a one-to-one mapping. There's a one to or many to one mapping in general between a vehicle name and the runner, because several things share the same runner. So there's a fewer number of runners than there are actual vehicles. But yeah, I think this is a valid test still. I think this is just a basic timer test using an EJB, or the use of a timer in an EJB.
Yeah, it was just, anything that was like, like using like EJB entity beans and EJB homes, EJB2, homes, and we updated that to use EJB3.
Well, so, oh, okay, but so is
And,
there,
and,
are there any
and no,
tests?
sorry, and no, yeah, so there's no, yeah, so there shouldn't be any embeddable. Yeah, the embeddable stuff was optional and,
Okay,
uh,
but since I'm running, actually, I'm checking the EE10 distribution. I need a way to filter those out. So is there an easy way to, is there a list of packages that we changed? Test packages that we changed? Or
yeah,
that we can ignore? So I
let's
should make sure
see.
I'm not
I mean,
spending time on those.
we can kind of get the, you know, the, yeah, we can kind of get the, uh, GB, yeah, so in 32, so I get, yeah, nothing in 32 changed.
Mhm. But I
Not
mean, are
recent.
you saying we just updated the test to run on the correct or the still supported EE component type
Yes.
as
Yeah.
opposed to we've eliminated the test? I mean, all I
Right.
care about is how we
Yeah.
eliminate the test.
Yeah. 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 I mean, there was some talk about eliminating tests that were out, they're using outdated, the outdated, or the optional technologies.
Mhm.
And Brian actually did a lot of the analysis and found that though the tests were important, it just happened to be using, EGB2, entity
Yeah.
beans or
Mhm.
homes or whatever. And Brian went through and rewrote all those tests to be, bring them up to EGB3, and I reviewed it and others reviewed it, and
So
it looks good. So we didn't lose the tests, we just updated them.
does that mean they moved from an older package to EGB3 package?
Uh,
No, so most of the tests that were impacted were not EGB tests at all. They were just using EGBs. So stuff in connector and JMS and JDBC and XA and all these other places were using EJBs, but they were using EJB2,
Mhm.
um, which would have made them invalid tests for anybody wanting to come in and just implement the
Yeah,
EJB3 stuff.
yeah.
So a lot of the EJB tests themselves didn't get updated. There are some small updates you can see. I do have a PR change in the one that Scott is showing right there.
Okay.
Um, but in general, the EJB test package is all 2x stuff still, and our optional tests that will need to be figured out what to do with. But then anything like EJB 3.0, EJB 3.2 should be good with minimal changes where um, we had to update some things to mesh with the other changes that we were making in kind of the core wrapper classes and things like that.
Okay, well, I guess I'll have to double check the PRs that you did to see exactly what,
Yeah, it's all in the TCK refactor branch right now. So if you're using that as your starting point, then
see, this is the problem. That's not the starting point because the problem with the TCK refactor branch is that the build.xmls don't work.
sure.
You know, they were restructured and so, all the imports and stuff are out of sync and so that's why we're still using the EE10 distribution as the mechanism by which we generate the deployment methods and just figure out what sort of vehicles are needed. I mean, ultimately that's going to have to get ported into the TCK refactor branch, but in terms of being able to actually run and understand what the build.xml is doing, we have to look at, one that actually still works. So I'll just look at this and figure out what tests are impacted.
so
Yeah.
I, just on, just for a tangent, I just wanted to ask a question. Oops. And I wanted to show, let's see, I guess this was a recent gist. So this is the output of the open rewrite recipe as it stands. And currently what that's doing is updating the persistence TCK tests to add, shrink, the shrink wrap, code to generate the, in most cases, ears and wars. I don't know if there were any actual jars, jar deployments. I think it was all like ears and wars mostly, but, and I just wanted to kind of, I don't have like a picture of it, beyond this, but you can kind of see, the only change we made to all of the persistence test is to add this, the shrink wrap code, and I wanted to run an idea out by the team. And yeah, what I'm thinking is, instead of modifying the existing, let's see, yeah, you can't really see the, the whole file, but there's a bunch of JUnit test methods. And I was thinking, instead of updating those files, I was thinking we would want to generate this code in a new EE client class for each of
Yeah,
these test methods, and have like and generate methods that contain any custom code that we need for dealing with, invoking the real underlying, test ultimately, but anything that's vehicle specific as well that we want to generate or, delegate to via other classes, in that per test method per vehicle, peer, which would kind of map to what we do in EE10, where we have the vehicle runner running that test under the, the vehicle and test method pair. So a way to map that kind of pairing, if
yeah,
that,
but once you're down to the at test, the equivalent of the at test method, you've already left the vehicle runner framework, and you've left the equivalent of the Archillian protocol layer. So this is why I want to try and look at, can we use the existing runners in a new custom CTS protocol per se, and minimize the amount of code change? Because the problem is, if to do this really properly, you would want to completely unroll all of this string testing and looking at properties, and have this annotation, much more declaratively driven, but that's just going to be a lot of busy work. So what I first want to try and do is, can I just use the test runners, the existing runners, and use all of its crazy logic where it's looking at, the properties map and the test arguments that were effectively passed into the runner. And so we don't have, because the other problem with not doing that is the way that the tests validate whether or not they pass or not is embedded in that logic. They're looking for results, and they're looking for side effects, and then they're calling or setting properties, or in calling, a test util method to set a property or a variable. So to me, it's to properly untangle CTS into Archillian and JUnit is just too much work.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to minimize what we have to do. Ultimately, it unfortunately still makes it a little bit opaque, but the protocol runners are a bit opaque anyway. And it's just that the CTS protocol is going to be even more opaque, because it has a lot of crazy logic driven by this property files map that's being passed in, which we can unravel over time. At least, I mean, you don't really have to deal with it like if you're adding new tests. So the nice thing is, you still be able to add new JUnit tests, once we have this working. At most you're going to have to update the deployment method to include new stuff, and you can add new tests or change existing test logic without having to mess around with the logic. Because effectively this is a protocol once it's set, it's set, and once it works, it works. If we decide that, there's, the protocol starts getting in the way because of something, if the vehicle is no longer appropriate, or we need to change how the protocol calls out to a particular type of EE component or vehicle, then that'll be a little more hairy, but that's the path I want to go. Because I feel like the progress I made makes me a little more hopeful that this time frame isn't arbitrarily long. But the real test is going to be actually getting a CTS protocol kind of bootstrapped and running from an Archelian to XML file, which still is going to have to somehow pull in the TS or JT.properties file, or TS.properties, or TS.jt, whatever that main properties file is, where vendors and the RI define a whole bunch of properties. I'll have to, if I get that bootstrap for a non-trivial vehicle, then I think we can start looking at defining a time frame for getting all these tests moved over.
I just opened up, just randomly picked this PM servlet vehicle runner. It seems pretty lightweight. The Java test harness classes that it depends on, they seem pretty abstract and easy to replace. I don't know if
Yeah.
there's any difficult ones, but they they appear to be light like that. That would be easily removed, and then just have a different interface that we just have our own interface that does represent status or whatever.
Yeah, but the problem is, I'm not sure exactly what you mean by own interface. The issue is these are relatively simple because they're relying on a lot of base class behavior. So for example, everything ultimately goes into the EE test. So for example, that's the class I don't see how we can easily replace. Both EE test and service EE test base classes have a lot of common logic, and that's where it's really the mapping between the properties files, the vehicles, and the expectation of the test results are being dealt with. So at this point, to me, it seems like that's a non-trivial thing to attack.
Okay. I mean,
Unrolling it.
Yep.
Maybe once we get it working, that we'll see that that's not the case, and then we can deal with it. But I would rather leave all the test vehicles in place, because that's what the artifacts today are generating.
So would we use the test harness library since it
Yeah,
references?
we
Okay.
would.
Okay.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. So it's
Yeah, basically the only thing we're getting rid of is that so today there's a main class that's invoked by the Java test framework, which passes in, these property files, the parse property files that, we are defined as part of the build.xml. But then ultimately ultimately all comes into an EE test.run method. And so basically we just throw away the Java test stuff. So we throw out away, well, except for when dependencies on classes, there's a status class we need. So basically that code is getting rid of, and the actual invocation of Java test as there's a task, an ant task to invoke Java test. That's actually how the framework is run. So that gets replaced with a Maven Surefire invocation, which sets whatever properties we still need. And then at that point, we're running Archelian, or we're running the JUnit 5 test that has an Archelian adapter, which sets the protocol, and then we're, the actual JUnit 5 test instead of at test Java doc annotations, which is how the Java test framework identifies tests.
So I'm just adding a note. So we're going to replace the protocol with Archelian, but we'll keep
Well, yeah, so no, basically what we need is I think what we can do is create a custom CTS protocol, which uses the existing vehicle runner logic and vehicles. The ant rewrite stuff that we already have to transform the at test name JavaDoc annotation into an actual at test JUnit5 annotation runs as it is. It's used as it is. The issue there is today we were trying to build, we have, it's a separate rewrite thing, but we have a add Archelian deployment method rewrite rule. I think we replaced that with, you know, an actual, with the code I'm working on, and that will, you know, take, that will parse the build.xml for the test and, you know, create the test artifact from that. I think that's the only change that will happen. You know, plus, you know, whatever additions or changes we need for the protocol, the augmented CTS protocol runner classes that need to be incorporated into the test archive. So I think if we can do this, then, you know, maybe once a base test is running, it's at most 2 months to get the rest of it. You know, that's kind of what I feel could be a possibility, but, you know, I really have to get an actual end-to-end test running, you know, with this new protocol.
Okay. And okay, so this really is okay. So this is a so this is reusing more of the infrastructure that we already have,
Yeah,
and it's resisting going in and rewriting as much as we might have had to rewrite, as we would discover as we kind of drive into, step into the layers of getting
yeah, and
that
effectively,
working.
so the app client protocol that I had to create for the app client vehicle or app client test, I mean, effectively it is doing the same thing, because again, it was too complicated to have to unroll the way that the test, the application client runner was outputting test results to standard out.
Yep.
You know, you change all those tests would just be too much, well, for me, too much work to figure out. And I don't know if in the future we can have a rewrite that does it more transparently, but I think that it's just going to be difficult because it's, you know, just embedded print logic. I don't know, but effectively, so it's very similar to what I did with the app client test vehicle and protocol. It just wasn't obvious to me at the time when I did that. The app client is more straightforward how it gets invoked. It wasn't obvious to me that the other vehicles were similar enough that I could take the same approach, but now I think that they are.
So, is there any, is there, is there anything to, split up the effort? Anything we should
Yeah,
be?
I mean, so I'm going to focus on um, a vehicle as a starting point and actually get a CTS protocol running that supports it. And I expect that there's going to be, I'm not sure exactly how I want to externalize and recreate the effect, the equivalent of the TS vehicles.xml,
Mhm,
when it builds the package, you know, it has a big if-then statement based on the vehicle name.
mhm.
And so basically we have to break out those, you know, into however we're going to generate the equivalent deployment method. I mean, one thing I was thinking of doing is creating, like the Antler 4 string template things. I'm just not sure the best way to do that, but ultimately we're going to have, you know, a different, the equivalent of what the TS vehicles XML does. So that all the vehicles, the customized vehicles, generation of the test artifact and inclusion of the protocols, you know, that will be separate tests that need to be done. Another test that still needs to be done is pulling or generalizing the app client protocol that I did. Um, I don't know. I guess the first thing I need to do is make sure that that's just pulled out of our Wildfly Archelion repo, you know, into a new, well, probably into the Archelion Jakarta EE repo, and then people can start to take a look at, you know, what changes are needed for it to actually be usable in, you know, other servers like Pyra and Open Liberty um, or Glassfish. So I mean, those are definitely, you know, things that can be parallelized once it's a little bit further along. So I'll try and get, I mean, maybe, yeah, maybe I'll break out the app client first, because then that should be the easiest. I mean, there's a lot more investigation, iterative work to get an actual CTS protocol running on one of these things.
It, so in this pull request that I was just opening up, I did add Java code to to take a test package. I didn't do you're supposed to be able to do a test method name as well, but to get a list of vehicles for a particular test method. Sorry, for a particular test package,
Mhm.
and that needs to be extended to be able to do the same for at the test method level, because some vehicles are specified for, you know, specifically for some test methods at that level as well. But anyways, if we want that
Yeah.
code that's, you know, that's not, you know, using the old framework, you know, that's, you know, kind of have that, um, you know, we can
There, yeah,
pull that
yeah,
in.
actually, there actually is a CTS class that does something similar. Are you using the vehicle verifier?
I just read, yeah, I read a copy of from the EE10 TC binary TCK. Um, just basically go through the you know, use the properties API to go through to do the search for, you know, you know, against the vehicles.properties file for the test package to basically get a list, you know, to get the set of vehicles for a particular
Okay.
test package. So we could, yeah, just we don't have to use the old code if we need, you know, need that. That's all. We
Okay.
could, you know, have a you know, implementation of that. That's in a pull request. But um so my other question, I guess, so while your head's down on that, I wonder if it makes sense for us to continue exploring, um, um, you know, the open rewrite, you know, the output that I just showed in that GIST to hack on trying to get that, you know, to try to, I guess it's the deeper way that may require more changes, but it's because it sounds like there's two different ways. There's one to remove Java test harness. I mean, there's multiple
Well,
ways. So I just don't know if we should continue that independently to keep both paths going, or, you know,
well, so it wasn't clear to me how are you removing the vehicles in the persistence test?
Let's see. Let's see, let me get the code. Oops.
While you're doing that, do you mind if I ask a couple questions?
Yep.
Sure.
So do you have a branch that can be looked at for the additional protocols in Archillion so
No,
that other vendors could try and implement some of the interfaces or use some of those?
no, so that's like the next thing I'm gonna work on is actually creating a protocol for one of the vehicles, as a starting point. So from there, we can, break it out into the start parallelizing the other protocols that are gonna be needed. I mean, to this point, I've only been able to parse and understand what the test artifact is and how the vehicles are being incorporated and how they relate to what would be an Archillion protocol. I mean, I think it's going to take probably another week before I have the basis for a protocol, that I could commit and push out to the Archillion Jakarta EE repo, and also put the app client protocol out there as well. I mean, that would be the first thing that I need people to look at is what changes are needed for the app client. So I'll do that first, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be good if there was a sample or example TCK tests that worked with the new protocol that could be attempted by each of the vendors that are going to try and use your Archillion. And then we'd be able to say, okay, at least that's working locally, or I ran into this, you need to make a change here because it didn't handle that or whatever, to get you some feedback on the particular protocol that you code up.
Yeah, that's so once after I get the app client pushed out, that'll be the first task, is to actually get another, basically a non-trivial invocation of a servlet. Something that can't be run with existing servlet protocol, basically,
Mm-hmm.
it will be my first task.
Yeah, and you know that I did the Rust protocol and had to make our stuff tolerated over in Liberty. So I mean, anytime we can get it working, I'll definitely work with the team to get something.
Okay. Yep. No, that sounds like the right way to go.
So just quickly in the add Archillion deployment method recipe, which is just a second open rewrite recipe that I added. I just have this bit of code that reads in the from Java from Java to shrink wrap, gets the test vehicles.property file and reads in the properties and goes through with the EE 10 test package, which we've converted the EE11 test package to the EE10 equivalent already, and just basically walks through looking for a match against the full package, or then it removes the the ending dot segment, a segment at a time, moving up to a to a shorter possible match. And the only thing that we didn't do was handle the test method level settings yet, like in this case, like the merge test method has special, has separate test vehicles that,
Yeah, I mean, I guess
that
one
kind of
question
thing.
would be, are these subsets of what the package has? Because the issue with, let me think about it. I mean, basically for every protocol that a test class uses, we're gonna have to have a separate at deployment method. And if, I'm trying to think if we support, I mean, basically you can down to the test method, you know, choose what deployment you're using. So I guess it's not a big deal.
I mean, this is, I mean,
But once you have the vehicles, what are you doing in terms of the add deployment method and the selected or the target vehicle?
so, I mean, that's not, yeah, that's not generated yet. That's just an idea. But basically right now in the app deployments, we're putting all of the needed, all of the same vehicles that were used in the equivalent EE10 test archive. We're putting all the, all the same classes
Yeah,
in.
okay. So this is using what we were doing before. Is it's using the EE10 deployment archive and just creating the deployment.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. This is using that. And so we're putting all of the, we're not just, we're not doing different deployments for the different vehicles. We're just putting all of the vehicles used
well,
by that. Yeah.
yeah, but that's one thing that is, so in our original prototype in this the open rewrite stuff, we were looking at deployment test or test artifact deployments that didn't really have a vehicle. So there are, I mean, what the build.xml framework does is it does create test artifacts based on the vehicle type. So that's why you see vehicles like, well, like you have it here, app managed vehicle. You know, there are, so if I have multiple vehicles for a test, the build.xml framework is creating multiple test artifacts. So there are going to have to be multiple Archelian at deployment methods, you know, on that test
For
class.
all of those different variations of that
Yeah.
deployment based on,
Yeah,
okay.
exactly. Yeah, that string array that you're parsing,
Mhm.
that determines how many at deployment methods are going to have to be on that test class. So that's definitely one thing that's different than the work that we've done to date. So I mean,
Okay, so there's a
and
need, so there's a need for that, for the deployments to adapt based on, um,
yeah.
s-
So and if I mean it
Yeah.
may be, I mean, well, it's going to have to be. The problem is you know, you could probably be streamlined such that it's really down to a single library for the protocol. But the problem is, especially if you're having the tests, the vehicles down to the test level method, is that the way that the Archelian adapter works is you can call out what deployment you want to use. But if it's differentiated based on vehicle type, that means you have to have that many different deployment methods so that you can, you know, label it. Because you're basically going to have to generate an at test plus, I can't remember what the Archelian annotation is, but you're going to have to add an Archelian annotation that's defining which deployment that test is targeting. And also, actually, when we run multiple, we may have to have an extension to Archelian to support that. I don't know that we'd support that. I don't know we have the notion. I don't know if that's a multi-valued annotation that would run the test multiple times, or that's something we're gonna have to add. So that's the other thing. I mean, that'd be something if someone could take a look at is how can you run a given test against multiple deployment part of or deployments. Is that something Archelian already supports, or are we gonna have to add that?
I think I had faced similar issue when I was trying manual refactoring. So basically, in a test class, I think we'll be able to create only one deployment with like every deployment will have a default name. So first of all, we'll have to name the deployment that we are creating.
Yeah.
That is
Which,
one thing.
yeah, and that's something we should be able to do from the open rewrite rule, because
Okay.
it definitely, every vehicle definitely has a name. You know, every test artifact definitely has a name. That's a combination of the test name, the vehicle, and something else. So that definitely we can get from the work that I'm doing. So I think we're gonna have to use the ant-based build stuff that I'm doing to have the information to create the at deployment. I don't think we can do that by looking at the existing test artifact, you know, the bundled test artifact. So I think that's one thing we'll have to do differently, but we then, with that, we certainly can create multiple at deployment methods, but what I don't know, you know, each with a unique name that matches the legacy name. But what I don't know is if Archelion supports the notion of that I can have a given test run against multiple deployments. I know you can say, I want this test to run against this deployment, but I don't know or think that we can have it target multiple deployments.
Well, I mean, we talked about before, you know, having multiple methods. So, I mean, so for each, yeah,
Yeah,
again, that sounds like pairing up a different combination for each.
yeah, yeah, but the problem, so so say you wanted to take, actually, maybe you could do it. I guess Open Rewrite supports it. You can add, I mean, yeah, one way you could deal with it is that you would have, for each vehicle, you take the test method and then, you know, augment it with a slightly different name and add the Archelion deployment target. Yeah, that'd be one way you deal with it. It makes the Open Rewrite stuff a little more complicated, though. It'd be better if we weren't adding methods, I think. I think it'd be better if we had support in Archelion to target multiple deployments for a given test method.
Well, one thing about the Open Rewrite, with the persistence test, the test, you know, clients that I'm updating right now in the latest recipe, I don't want to be updating because we're already including those classes. I really wanted to go to a new class anyway, so I don't know. Like, I think the Open Rewrite is great for reading the current test classes and knowing what to generate, but you know, we can just, you know, the actual generation, you know, probably is just pure Java. It's probably not Open Rewrite itself. It's just generating on the fly a new Java class. I don't know if that it helps per se, but just wanted to say Open Rewrite itself probably wouldn't be adding new methods, which you can do, but it just, you know, it seems like we want to just generate new test sources anyways. So I think it's just Open Rewrite reading and passing the, you know, the job, the EE test sources to get the base methods that are in each underlying component TCK test that we want to call the ultimately or delegate to, but maybe.
What we, I don't think we want to delegate because I think there's an issue with, there's an expectation in the current CTS framework that when a test is created, there's setup methods that are called, that are invoked. So, you know, you'd have to propagate those off to the delegate. I mean, you'd have to show me an example of a new test class that you'd be generating, so I can understand what the, you know, what the difference is versus just updating the existing test class. So what, you know, if you have an example of that, or when you have an example of that, ping me and I'll take a look.
Yeah, I mean, if it's not possible, if it turns out not to be possible, then what we end up with then is duplicating, you know, like we have the test methods, but once we duplicate them, then we have, you know, 2 copies of every test, you know, which explodes the maintenance, the future maintenance that we have to
Well, yeah, but
maintain.
I mean, the approach we're taking here is that ultimately how we're doing this is there's gonna be a one-shot refactoring, right, of the existing TCK rewrite branch. into something that runs, if we're creating if the approach is to create a new class that replaces the old one, then we would be deleting the old one. I mean, I guess the only caveat or question I'd have with deleting the old ones that makes it more difficult to, do diffs and look at changes. I mean, I think it's easier if the open rewrite is modifying the existing code, because then you can directly see, the diff. Which is usually a little easier to understand. But so the approach is we run a one-shot transformation of the code, but once that's checked in, then it's done, right? Then we just move forward with that code base. There's no other references, there's no further use of open rewrite.
Well,
Or XML.
I mean, that would work for EE 12. For 11, we already went to ballot, so we'd either have to reballot like the EL and the persistence if we replace those TCKs with new TCKs that handled both SC mode and EE mode.
Yeah, no, I'm just talking about the platform TCK. So
yeah, the platform TCK produces the standalone persistence and EL and other TCK.
yeah, but, I'm not okay, but I'm not talking about the build of standalone TCKs. I'm just talking about the actual core profile, web profile, and full platform TCK tests.
Okay, so the EE test only,
Yeah.
and so we'd keep those separate. Okay, I got a little confused there.
Yeah, it's a done deal, right? Yeah, for E11, it's done.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we already shipped. Yeah, we didn't want to modify the TCKs we've already have shipped. That's all.
Yeah,
Just
for
been
sure.
trying to dance around that.
Yeah, no, for sure.
But the question is valid, because what happens when you have to do a service fix for some of those TCKs? Will there be two different branches that there will be maintained for the standalone SE ones to use versus the platform to use?
Yeah, I don't understand. So you'd have to show me, Scott, an example of what we're talking about. I mean, how do we generate a standalone and yet have integration tests? Aren't those in separate source trees?
So no, it's like right now we in the current TCK refactor repo. Let me just point at the persistence test. Let's see. So yeah. So right now we basically have released an artifact for the persistence TCK, the standalone 3.2.0, for persistence 3.2 based on the test under here. And these are the same tests that we want to run. Yeah, in the past, we have always run the same test on SE and EE. And the challenge now is that now that we've gotten to the stage in EE11 where we've already have gone to ballot with persistence, now we don't want to, we only have one copy right now. We only have one copy of all of the persistence tests. Some of them are EE specific, but many of them are for both, and they have always been for both.
This is run using the legacy Java tests CTS framework then?
No. It's actually this shrink wrap code that generates a jar archive that is used for TCK testing, that runs it in SC mode by just producing a simple jar that can be used by an SC application that class paths set up or what have you. But
But how, I guess
It's
Well,
not using EE at all. It's just generating test archives and
so Jay's
um,
question
I,
is valid, is
I, I,
how is it addressing or updating the EE integration test gonna affect that, the generation of that artifact?
just the test source is the same for, going to be the same for both, if, by default. Uh,
Yeah, but so if we, and is there, so it's, this is, the code base has already been, converted over to Archillion and JUnit?
let me grab an example. Okay, so I haven't actually run it myself, but let's see.
Yeah, to answer that question, yes, it actually uses Aquilin and JUnit, as
Okay.
standalone persistence. Yes.
Well, all right, but that's certainly a caveat then is, yeah, we have to be careful. And so how many standalone TCKs do we have like that? For each
EL, some are already moved to their own repos, and
Is there, I mean, does it make any sense? Well, it's already part of the, does it make any sense to split off the EE specific tests? So those tests are not run in SE mode, I assume, right?
There's two parts. There's EE specific tests that integrate particular specs with other specs that need to be covered within the platform or profile TCK. And then there is run every test that's in that component TCK in all the vehicles to make sure it works actually in an EE environment, not just in a SE environment.
Yeah, oh, cool. Okay. Well,
There's two aspects that we take care of here.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I have to look at the source tree. I mean, yeah, and I mean, my question would be, first question would be is, can those be separated into basically two test source trees such that we can know we're not impacting a standalone service release?
there's not a separate source tree. I mean,
But
traditionally,
that's what I'm saying,
we have,
be,
yeah, we've never had a separate source tree. It's
right.
always been
I
the same,
mean, it's similar to what we
shared.
had to do with the CDI though, right? CDI integration.
I mean, there's a lot of, like in the common vehicle classes and are in the common like persistence abstract or common client classes. There's a lot of code that that has, if in EE mode, get the entity manager factory in the expected way. If it's in standalone, you're gonna always be using the database manager, the database server as the transaction, and use resource local always. And so there's a lot of conditional code that kind of lets at the test level it depend on common code, abstract code that deals with the differences between EE and SE. So
Yeah,
that
so what hasn't been done on the JPA framework is the ability to run this new set of tests against the vehicles. Is that right? In an app server?
I mean, we haven't done anything with the vehicles yet. That was going to be like a next
Okay.
thing to look at.
Yeah, all right. Well, that does make this a little more tricky. Well, I'll have to take a look at that. So I'm not sure what you're doing in terms of a general transformation of the code base does make sense, because yeah, we have to still be able
I mean, it's not a, no, you can't modify the code, the code. It's just the code should work for both. And it would be sad if we did, if we do have to modify the code. It basically means we have to at least, do the this is a TCK service release equivalent that includes test changes, which is at the discretion of the spec lead typically. But it could be,
well, yeah, but it does fall in, I mean, we do have a specific set of rules that we're supposed to follow, so I,
we updated the set of rules to allow for test changes at the discretion of the lead, and try and not make insignificant changes. So this seems, this sounds like something that would not, match against that. So I just wanted to point out that it is possible to make compatible, to make reasonable changes to
but I
tests
guess,
like these.
so, but that further goes to, then I certainly don't think replacing every test class with a new test class is a reasonable change. If we've already put this out, I mean, I would, try and do the minimum amount of effort for the EE integration test for these, any standalone TCK they've already released.
Yeah, that's why I was thinking about delegating, but I hadn't done the work that you've done to analyze the ant, internals. So, this, and this dynamic vehicle, I mean, that comes in and, class and all that. I missed that. But
Yeah, so what I expect is that this is that the code that the code that will come out of the stuff that I've done is just going to be a library that an open rewrite rule is going to call to actually generate the app deployment method. It's going to actually call multiple times with different test vehicles, or well, yeah, actually, because it's going to return the code for the method, so it's going to have to call it multiple times with the vehicles that are required. That's expect how it's going to integrate into the open rewrite stuff that we've done. So it's basically going to replace the existing Archelian deployment rule. To call and actually get the correct vehicle for the test package, given the vehicle name, and that will be based on parsing the build.xml.
So we're over by 17 minutes. I just wanted to echo on the platform call yesterday, the initial schedule change was to give this another quarter. And I think I mean, typically there's I think the marketing team was looking for, to have this ready in time, to have EE11 be ready for the typical, fall, end of fall Jakarta event.
Is what date?
But we didn't give a date yet. But
what's the date of the EE thing?
I think it's December, but I'm not.
So from a marketing perspective, they were looking at doing some October marketing for Jakarta 11. Obviously, Jakarta 1 is in December, like it always is. That's the latest we would ever want anything to be, so it would be like November. But we shouldn't be trying to slip these. It sounds like we are batting around a lot of ideas, and there's not a design actually created for this yet.
Right. Yeah.
And we should come up with a design and then work on implementing it. That's the way it sounds like to me.
Yep, absolutely.
It's the one of the difficulties is it's bigger than than anything else we've done, and we've danced around and kicked the can down the road, if you will, on doing this, because no one really knows the design well enough. And it sounds like we're coming more to grips with it, to get there where we want to be with the design. But
Yeah.
But
Well,
it's a
but
good point.
I think the sticking point to date has been not, we've been trying to avoid having to get into all of the build.xml logic. And, you know, I mean, I'm at the position where you can't, because effectively that is the code base. I mean, unfortunately, the way this is built is, or that this runs, is that Ant is part of the test framework. I mean, there's no getting around it. You know, they have the build.xml is defining certainly the test vehicle artifact. So I mean, that absolutely is the direct mapping from the CTS to our Killian deployment method. You know, we've been trying to get around this by parsing the existing distribution outputs, but you know, I don't think that's a viable way, because the problem is, even if we could actually do the add deployment methods that way, the problem is there are still a lot of behavior that's driven off of properties that are in the build.xml files that both affect the test artifacts and the runtime behavior. You know, so you have the test name and the vehicle name and, you know, several other properties going into that EE test.run method, which then affect behaviors, which is, you know, why I'm saying I don't think we can avoid dealing with the existing vehicle classes and the existing property files, you know, and effectively bootstrapping the same test environment with a lot of properties, you know, being passed into even our Killian. You know, that's where I think I've landed today, to try and minimize the scope of this.
Right, we've done the prototyping, so if we can, you know, get something prototyped, come with design, and once people know where we're going and what the design is, more people can easily help out because they know what the heck we're doing and what design looks like and how it needs to change and do it.
Yeah, so the first thing I'll do is get the app client protocol pulled out of our Wildfly, our Killian container managed stuff into the Killian Jakarta EE repo. And then I'll send an email out once that's done, so other vendors can take a look at, you know, how can that be used? Can that be used for how they run the app client tests? And then I'll get back to iterating on getting an actual CTS protocol pushed out to the same repo, so that we can start expanding or adding protocols as needed, and validating that whatever protocol first lands can actually be run. You know, that's kind of the plan of action.
Okay, that sounds good. And from a schedule point of view, I'll talk to you later. And I assume, you know, others aren't as interested. We have the platform call next Tuesday. We can talk more, you know, together as a group, whoever wants, you know, whoever's on that, you know, there as well. But if anyone's interested in scheduling, yeah, yeah, could definitely, yeah, we should all, yeah, want to open that up to others as well. But I just wanted to get Scott's input some more on some options, if there, you know, are any that might help me come up with an estimate that I've been asked to deliver.
Yeah, well, I mean, to Jared's point, I mean, I think we have to have at least a semi-concrete proof of concept, you know, that's demonstrating something that can be expanded across all the test vehicles and tests. And it is kind of a wild card, thorny issue that we've released standalone TCKs. So for whatever standalone TCKs we've released, we definitely, you know, have to be a little careful and or, you know, have approval from basically, I think, the spec committee, really, that if we change that code base, it's gonna be, you know, amenable with the current TCK service release rules.
If it's a blocker, it's a, you know, like for the release, like if it breaks the release, you know, then, you know,
Well, yeah, if it stalls the release, maybe they'll punt on it, but you know,
Yeah.
it is a question we have to get answered. You know, once we have a proof of concept of how it could be done, you know, whether or not it's worth updating the standalone TCK that have been released with this or not. I mean, if this is already done with our Killian and JUnit, that I assume simplifies it. Yeah, I mean, my feeling would be that there should be a way to separate those out, but if, you know, you're saying that they're kind of heavily intertwined just based on a single property, then I have to look at it. I mean, I can't look at it now because I gotta kind of stay heads down and getting a proof of concept out, but I mean, once I've got that out, I'll take a look at the JPA as an example and see how we might do that with minimal impact.
let's see. So just, yeah, just stop screen sharing so I can see the screen. One question that came up in the platform call, I think we were, you know, you were on that one, Scott, but I was just talking, was, you know, for EE11, we should consider whether we should just use the Ant and Java test harness. And, you know, I think if we size this, if we get, when we get more concrete, if we come up with a way to consider that, that might, yeah, that, you know, I don't know how we would do that since we already went to ballot with, based on the TCK refactor branch, but,
Well, I mean, yeah, anything is gonna have to have some kind of exceptional ballot, I guess, at this point, but I mean, until, I mean, my position, certainly Red Hat's position would be, you know, until we prove that this can't be done.
Yep.
In a reasonable time frame, that's the moving this stuff over was a priority for this release.
okay, I just wanted to touch on, yeah, that, because that, yeah, that had come up, and so, okay. Yeah, let's stay in touch and yeah, talk more next week.
Okay, I mean, look for an email when I've got the Archillian, or I'm sorry, the app client protocol